Always remembering that we do indeed move in the way in which we think we are constructed. However, when we sit, we do not sit on our legs. Whatever we perceive to be our legs, we do not sit on those. And we remember that the tips of our tongues want to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. Good morning, everybody. feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. Feeling better, objectively. How's that even possible? With the help of your only no-nonsense podcast, brought to you through the Best Feeling Network, and the help of your own body from the inside out. I hope we are allowing all of these words to go in one ear and out the other. And how does that feel for you? Do not take any of what I say for my word for it, but how does that feel for you as we are allowing all of these words to go in one ear and out the other? In this simulation that we live in which, did you know that we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with a breath that you take? And in this simulation of ours, if we were to hold our controller together properly, so that we are all synced up and locking fingers in our awareness, so to speak, we are pretending that there are candles. In everybody's mind, there's a candle in front of their lips that they're placing there. They're pretending there's a candle in front of their lips. In every being, they're pretending there's a candle in front of their own lips that they're trying to not put out. And they're not thinking about inhaling, they're not thinking about exhaling. There's just a candle in the imagination that's placed in front of their lips, like a birthday candle that they're trying to not put out. And that's the controller that they're holding as they become aware of the world. This candle reacts to their awareness and flickers the sounds that they hear, and they're just trying to not put it out. It's like Charmander or something. And how does that feel for you? As we are imagining that is happening in everybody's awareness, in everybody's mind's eye or whatever, for you Scott Pilgrim fans. And then to hold that controller properly further, if we are pretending to remember that the tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth, as this candle is just flickering there. Thank you, Felipe. Welcome back. How art thou? Come in. Have a seat. I hope you're doing well. And remembering that the back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical, up and down, up and down. As we were just remembering, there's a candle in the awareness of every person, and it is their controller just flickering in front of their lips. Maybe even to music or sounds that they're hearing, the candle flickers a little bit as it becomes aware of the vibrations that the senses allow in the body. And how does that feel for you as we're trying to not put it out? Turns out the muscles that are involved with feeling that candle happen to be the muscles that elongate the spine in the proper way from the inside out, as opposed to trying to match this stand up straight, put your back against a wall thing, which doesn't seem to work out very well when we remember that the weight bearing portion of the spine is actually the front, not the back. And so how do we get the most satisfying elongation and stretch of the spine if the weight and the weight-bearing portion of the spine is actually the front and not the back? How do we align that then? Where do we place our body against to get that nice good stretch that is intended for our body? Well, if you would please pretend with me that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out, along with everybody else too that you see around you. For seeing a candle in front of their lips might possibly just remind you from the outside in of the candle in front of your lips as well. As aren't we all kind of similar in that sense, in the sense that all of our bodies have a body in which the design says the weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. So as we are becoming aware of people today, we might always want to keep that front of the candle, that candle in front of our lips, like Charmander. We might want to keep that always nice and lit, and always in our awareness. And as we look at others, because they are also like us, might it help us loop back our attention back on our candle, yet still look at the outside world as we remember that there's a candle in front of their lips that they are trying to not put out. Might that have us be doing almost like two things at once? Might that almost be like a yin and yang? as we are placing our awareness onto the candle in front of the other person's lips, in which we are aware of, but they are a person just like us. Oh yeah, don't we also have a candle in front of our lips? We are experiencing a oneness with one another on True Love Tuesday. It is 5:39 a.m. We are stretching our self-awareness every weekday morning. It is 5:39 a.m. October 19th, 2021, Tuesday. It's another True Love Tuesday. Another True Love Tuesday. Every day on Pal Go On, breaking down misconceptions brought to us by us and by society, but specifically on True Love Tuesdays, discussing the relationship between the sexes. And maybe children, as that is what comes out of the sexes. Good morning, everybody. We are talking about a oneness today. A oneness today. As in, we've heard people say, do you see others people as more similarly to you, or do you see them as more different to you? On average, isn't just a matter of perspective and context. And so how do we go about feeling a oneness, and why would you want to go about feeling a oneness, and why did we not go about feeling a oneness before with people? Why did we not see people as one with us before? And how do we go about it? We will discuss today on True Love Tuesday after this short break, but only if you remember that there's a candle in front of my lips that I'm trying to not put out. I'll be right back. My name is Herbie. Good morning. Right here on Pal Go On. Oneness. Remembering that we actually have 6 senses, not 5. Kinesthesia being our 6th sense, our sense of self, where all of the other senses are grounded in our ability to sense whether or not our weight is being delivered into the front of the shins or not. Are we remembering always that your fleshy, impressive calves actually hang up and above and over your front of your shins and do not support your weight? Those fleshy, impressive calves of yours drape over the front of your shins and so should not hold any of the weight, as the front of your shins feel the weight of your body. Even if your ankles might need to angle for this to happen, let it be so. Welcome back Padawan. True Love Tuesdays. It is 5:44 a.m. Good morning. Wherever you are doing, whatever you are, whatever you have traveled to, whether you are here in the United States or whether you are very far on Pluto, whether you are driving a car right now, whether you are working at the shop, perhaps you are gargling some mouthwash. Perhaps you are cooking yourself a nice dinner steak for you and the cute mate. Wherever you are, I want to welcome you and invite you to hold this controller properly with us in this simulation of ours in which we die every 5 minutes. But that timer is reset with a breath that you take. Here on Padawan, we invite you to hold this controller properly in this simulation of ours by pretending that there's a candle in front of your lips, but also keeping in your awareness that everybody, just like you, has a candle in their awareness in front of their lips. It's like a birthday candle that they're trying to not put out. We thought we stood up straight by extending the crown of our head to the top as high as we could. But we thought that that's how you get the most height. That's how you get the most satisfying height and most satisfying elongation of the body. Best stretch and most natural stretch of the body was to extend the crown as high as we could, look as tall as we could, or was to pretend that there's a candle in front of our lips that we're trying to not put out, so that the front of our spine can deliver the weight down properly through itself, and we can allow the top half of our body separate from the bottom half of our body properly, so as to allow the freedom of the pelvic floor and the diaphragm to descend downwards and give us the proper breath that we want. Were we to match what we wanted to see in the mirror by looking up right big and tall, by extending our crown up to the ceiling and our backs against the wall? Might we have been trying to copy what we wanted to see in the mirror? And what benefits might come from holding the controller actually properly, by standing up actually straight, by pretending with me that there's a candle in front of my lips that I'm trying to not put out. And I might be doing the same for you. As I'm remembering that the tip of my tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front of my teeth, or the back of my bottom front teeth. And remembering that the back 1/3 of my tongue is vertical up and down. You might be imagining that of me, and I might be imagining that of you as we hold this controller properly in this simulation of ours. How are you doing today? I hope you have been a good person today and been good to yourself and feeling thyself wherever thou art. Hope you've been getting yourself some water. Hope you've been getting yourself food on time, treating yourself well, so that you can treat others well. One-ness. We're talking about one-ness today. Whether you are jogging outside or working on some personal work, whether you are working on interpersonal relationships or intrapersonal relationships right now, whether you're rubbing your eyes or whether you've been awake for the last 24 hours or maybe 2 hours, I want to welcome you to a conversation that perhaps has always been being had, but maybe in different capacities. Different non-digestible capacities. Today we are talking about oneness. Oneness, as in, do we see ourselves as similar with others, or do we see ourselves as dissimilar from others? Do we see ourselves having a oneness with others? How could we see a oneness with others? Why would we want to see a oneness? Why would we want to see anything as ourselves on True Love Tuesdays as we're discussing the relationships between the two sexes? When we see ourselves and the prospective mate and people in general, how often do we see them as someone as ourselves, and how deeply do we see them as someone as ourselves? Is it important to see them as ourselves? Is it important to view anything as ourselves, or should we see ourselves as separate from everything? As in everything is new, as in we must learn everything as if it is in a completely new entity in which we have no relationship to, as if we cannot relate in anything with. Or as we are always projecting, are we not also able to see ourselves as anything? Apply our own needs to anything? Don't we have needs? Aren't we familiar with our body's needs? Is it possible to see a oneness with something that you admire when you see them as so highly above you? Is it difficult to see things as one with us as sometimes? When we might feel inferior, when we might feel that this gigantic mountain exists between us and what we admire so highly, might we feel inferior? Is it harder to feel a oneness with something that is blinding you like that? Blinding you with greatness, perhaps? Is it difficult to feel a oneness with something you so desire? Though you might want to be one with it, when we feel so inferior, when we feel so down on our luck, is it sometimes hard to feel a oneness with something that we want? A oneness with something that we think that we deserve, a oneness with a place in our lives, or a version of ourselves in which we want to be. Is it difficult to see a oneness with ideas like that? Is it difficult to imagine ourselves already there? Is it difficult to imagine ourselves in greatness? Is it difficult to feel a oneness? What does a oneness mean? Can I understand? Can I feel a relationship with? Can I apply my personality? But what's a personality compared to needs? Don't we all have needs? And are we also able to apply the idea of those needs and see a oneness with others through needs? Yes, it might be hard to see a oneness perhaps with a great superhero, as they do incredible life-saving acrobatics with these bodies that we all would like to be at. Incredible feats in which we all would participate in should we have the ability to. Things that we can reach far, far away. Everybody would like to be able to fly. Everybody would like to be able to have the best romance. Everybody would be able to like to be the strongest. Everybody would like to be able to be the most generous. But at the center of it all, at the center of your relationship with not just others, but especially with yourself, and through the transitive property, your lover. Your lover! At the center of it all, don't we all have needs? Perhaps we do not all know what we would all like out there if we were thinking about what we would stretch our hands out for. Should we have the energy and the reach for it? Should we have the energy and reach for it, perhaps we would all reach for different stars. How can we relate to one another? However, when we go to the center of gravity, do we not all have needs at the center? Perhaps what we would do with all of our powers might be different, but at the center of it all, where the gravity falls, the center of it all, do we not all have needs? How might we relate to one another when we do not all have superpowers, when we do not all have the immediate access to being able to be sensitive like one another? Or any other kind of admired ability in media or stories or video games or even music that we aspire to be? We might not all have the same reach, and we might not all reach for the same things once we get power, once we have the ability to reach for the stars. We might not be able to relate to someone who we feel has so much power when we feel like we do not have power in the world. We might not be able to see a oneness with what we do when we are overflowing with power, but when we are overflowing with needs, all the way at the center of every experience. You, the mortal human, do we not all have similarities in needs? How do we see a oneness with others in which we feel so separate? How do we feel oneness with the rich when we feel so poor? How do we feel a oneness with the smarts when we feel so dumb? And how do we feel a oneness with what we love when we feel so unloved? How do we feel a oneness with which we have so much love when we feel so unloved? How do we feel a oneness? When you are bursting with love, aren't you such a different person? Aren't the things that you go for, aren't the dreams that you go for, aren't the people that you talk with, aren't the statements that you feel comfortable saying out loud so different when you feel overflowing with love versus the version of you when you feel completely absent of love, when you feel unloved? Aren't they two very different versions of you? What you would project out to the world might be very different because you're in very two different states when you are feeling overflowing with love versus when you are feeling completely unloved. What you output to the world might be very different. How can you relate? How can you feel a oneness? Well, in the opposite direction, don't we all have needs? Don't we all have needs? Don't we all must needs feel better at any point in time? Don't we all must needs breathe better? Don't we all must needs to feel better? Doesn't our spirits must needs to float to the surface like little rubber duckies as well as they can? Should we get ourselves free of any obstacles in our way? Doesn't our spirits always want to, like buoyant duckies, rubber duckies, doesn't all of our spirits always want to rise to the highest top that they can? And so doesn't we all must needs breathe better to love our body, to feel most in the moment as possible? Don't we all must needs to pretend that there's a candle in front of their lips that we're trying to not put out, as we're not thinking about exhaling or inhaling? And we're not thinking about exhaling or inhaling, simply allowing this candle in front of our lips to rest and flicker. And remember that everyone's in their mind's eye is doing the same. And did you know that the tip of my tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth? And might we give ourselves permission to remember that the back 1/3 of our tongues are vertical, up and down, up and down. Say it with me. Vertical. Up and down, up and down. The back 1/3 of my tongue is, say it with me, vertical. Up and down, up and down. And how does that feel for you? What we end up doing with all of the energy what we end up doing with all of the energy that flows from our body once we get our needs met might be completely different. perhaps very difficult to relate to. However, don't we all have needs that must be met? What we do with the energy our body experiences once our needs are met might be completely different, but don't we all have needs that must be met? Don't we all die every 5 minutes? But that timer is reset with a breath. So isn't all of our breaths life or death? We'll be back to talk about oneness. How and why and all things to do about a oneness. Right after this short break, but only if you remember that the back 1/3 of your tongue wants to be vertical, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. beautiful knee placement. And we are remembering that our feet are indeed not L's, but arches. We are indeed movers. Welcome back. Welcome back. We've made it to the second half of the show. Welcome back. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without the simulation of ours in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath you take. Every breath you take. I hope you are allowing all of these words to go in one ear, out the other, as we are simply stretching our self-awareness like a muscle every weekday morning and inviting you to join us in these body magic tricks so we can feel so good from the inside out. Welcome back to the second half of the show. As you know, in the beginning, middle, and end of the show, we will be shouting out any comments or chats or anything like that. Felipe Mullen, can't imagine birthday candles because yours would be too numerous. You're gonna be so aligned. Your body's gonna feel so aligned, it's gonna be nuts. You're gonna have like so many spines. We will be reaching any announcements towards the end of the show. But just a short reminder that we are just on YouTube right now. We used to be on DLive as well as Twitch, but there was just a bunch of stuff going on in the world right now, and so a bunch of passcodes changing and stuff. Anyway, we'll talk about it in a little bit. So right now we're just on YouTube. Welcome back to another True Love Tuesday. Today we're talking about oneness. Oneness on True Love Tuesday. We're talking about sexes on the True Love Tuesdays, as in the relationship between the two sexes, but every day we're talking about the relationship between thyself and the self first and foremost, as that is the most important relationship you could possibly have, is the self with thyself. What is this relationship with thyself? With thyself, as in this God thing, not this floating sky God who's shooting down arrows and shooting down lightning bolts at you, but simply this relationship with you and your design, your ability to feel better from that body of yours from the inside out, by shifting your awareness around, like placing a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out, and remembering that the tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back, the bottom, front teeth, as you're not thinking about exhaling or inhaling. But this candle is just flickering in front of your mouth. And my mouth. And everybody's mouth around you. But next relationship that's most important after that relationship between you and yourself, many might say, is the relationship between you and your lover. The relationship between the two sexes is what we are discussing today. A oneness when we're speaking to our lovers, when we're speaking to a romantic interest. Might we be wondering what the heck, how do we communicate with one another? When there are so many infinite words you can be saying, infinite ways you can be saying it, the timings you can be saying it, what reasons you can be saying it, what words lead to the next word, it's all very musical, isn't it? It's like a dance or something, right? How does one decide or determine whether they are interested or being interested in? How does one decide or determine how interested both parties are? Why does it sometimes seem as though they are not in unison? How does it sometimes feel as though they are not understanding one another, that the signals get crossed? How is it possible that we could possibly be looking at the same relationship but have two people having a completely different idea of what that relationship is? How does one identify how much interest there is in you? Is it a oneness? Is it any particular word that we say? Is there any particular statement that must be said in order for us to understand or feel that someone loves us? Is there any particular statement, or is there any perfect way to say it? Is there any particular tone it needs to be said in for us to understand it? Is there any specific discrete statement or movement or signal for us to know if somebody's interested or someone who loves us to the degree at which we want to? How do we know what they're feeling on the inside out? How do we know what they're feeling about us? How do we know what we're feeling from the inside out about them? We might be buying them gifts. We might be spending time together. They might be buying us gifts. We might be spending dinners together. We might be being intimate physically. Is there any discrete signal for us to know that from the inside out, they feel the way about us that we want them to feel? How do we know? Everybody's so different, right? Everybody's a different person. Isn't that so scary? How are you ever going to find love when everybody's so different? Everybody has different wants. Everybody has different dreams. Everybody has different families. Everybody's watched different cartoon series. Everybody's so different. And yet we expect to be loved, and we expect to understand that they love us. How do we understand that? How do we understand that? How do we discern whether or not somebody loves us? When everybody's so different, is there any discrete symbol, signal, or statement, or tone that is shared between all of us that we just know that they love us now? When everybody is so different, how do we know that they love us? How do we know that their idea of love for us is our same idea of love? When we're feeling that from the inside out, how do we know that? When everybody's so different, why might we need to feel a oneness? If everybody is so different, how can we understand if they love us? What is this love thing coming out of their body? Might we always must needs to feel a oneness from anything to understand if it loves us or not at all? Might we already need to feel a oneness with anything in order to feel love from that thing at all? For how can we understand what this love thing might look like coming from outside from them, other than from what we know to be love from ourselves, from inside out? Without projecting ourselves onto whatever we want love from, how can we understand if they love us? And so must we not already must feel a oneness with whatever we love in order to even understand a love from them, let alone receive it? Must we already feel a oneness with whatever it is that we want love from? And so how do we feel a oneness when everyone's so different? When everybody has watched so many different cartoon series, when everybody's watched a different movie, and when everyone listens to different music, when everyone's got a different mental disability, when everyone's got a different sexual orientation, when everyone's got a different family, when everyone's got different friends, how do we feel a oneness with everybody? When everyone has different foods that they like, shows that they like, people that they hang out with, how do we feel a oneness with them? Well, don't we all have needs? Love needs, food needs, shelter needs, sleep needs. Love needs, like abandonment needs, as in not being abandonment, or not being abandoned, needs of not being abandoned. Sleep needs. Body alignment, feeling okay needs. breathing needs, especially as we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with a breath, so isn't every breath so important to us? As we're always living in the moment, not really sure if we're gonna get that next breath necessarily. Don't we need to feel a oneness with anything that we want love from? But how do we feel a oneness when everyone is so different? When everyone wants different things, when everybody has experienced different things, well, doesn't everybody have similar needs? Don't we all have the same needs to feel better? Don't we all have the same needs for our breath to feel as best as possible, for we don't necessarily know, our bodies don't necessarily know from the inside out whether or not we'll get another breath, but we have faith in it. I'll be right back after this short break. Talk about what to do with this oneness. You want this love from the opposite sex, and we do see that we need a oneness with them. Don't we all have needs? But only if you remember that the tip of your tongue wants to be anchored to the back and bottom of your teeth. Muscular freedom through balance. I hope you're keeping the front of your shins in your awareness. Can we make anyone fall in love with us? Are we genies? Are we able to make anyone fall in love with us? Or are we able to simply just become aware of what is there in order for us to be able to do something about it? How do we do that? How do we move our awareness around? By simply pretending that there's a candle in front of the lips that we're trying to not put out. Remembering that the tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. The back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical as we are sitting down and strapping in for the last quarter of this True Love Tuesday. We're ready for some action. Are we ready for some action? As in Herbie, we're gonna go out and do some running, as in we're gonna do some jumping jacks. Or as an action of our awareness. Shifting our awareness around, shifting our awareness. How might one know whether or not somebody is flowing with you? Is there any particular word or statement that will allow us to know whether or not someone loves us? Do they even know from themselves inside out if they love you? Do you know for certain that you loved anything? How do you know? Is it a comparison? And with everything in your world, is that how you were able to find out whether or not you love something? Is because of all these comparisons you were making? So how are you able to find that out in someone else's world when there are all these infinite ideas that are swarming their heads, causing them to get to this one conclusion that you are supposedly at? How is this even possible for you to know whether or not they love you? Well, the truth, just like all truths, isn't it the truth because it stands the test of time? Able to withstand the indomitable scrutiny that is time itself. Is that not what defines the truth? So when we are looking for love in our lives, as we know it to be defined as the truth without hatred, as we're looking for more love in this world, might it be important to see what is true? And what is true, is that not what withstands the scrutiny of time itself? And so how do we know if someone loves us? How do we know if we love someone? Does our spirit continuously represent a spirit of oneness with them? Maybe we don't know what this love thing is, but we can damn sure know that we're getting further from the truth if we are not feeling a oneness with somebody we are trying to understand love from. Don't we ourselves only pay attention and love most what we love ourselves? Don't we obsess over what we love? And so for us to understand one another, for us to understand whether or not somebody is giving us what we want, don't we even must understand what it is that we want? And so don't we actually must project that onto them, onto our love? Don't we actually need to project ourselves onto one another to understand whether or not this thing they are giving us is love? First and foremost, it might not match up with what they believe love is, but in order for us to even understand what we are trying to receive, must we also project ourselves onto this thing that we consider to be love? Don't we have to actually project ourselves onto this person so that we can understand whether or not this love thing that we are experiencing from them is the same thing that we are expecting? How can we understand it should we not be speaking the same language? Don't we have to feel a oneness? Isn't a oneness necessary for us to feel the love that we are looking for? So that we can identify. We can only feel the love that our own body is experiencing. And so this love that we project out to the world, whatever it is that we're passionate about, don't we have to feel a more oneness with whatever it is, whomever it is that we might be speaking to? So, Nani. We might be trying to feel a oneness. We might feel that we might have felt in our times in our lives in which we did not feel a oneness with a potential, perhaps a friend. How might we get this love that we want in the world, in our lives? How might our awareness assist us in this? Well, isn't the truth something that develops, and the truth is something that reveals itself over time as it withstands the scrutiny of time, human interaction over time? So how do we know love if not the spirit the spirit of two people over time? How often are they submitting to a oneness with one another over time? Do we have times in our lives in which we felt we did not feel like we were clicking with somebody? What was it? Was there any particular statement, or was it the spirit over time that felt like there was not a oneness? We might agree on some things. We might have a lot of fun watching the same cartoon shows, the same movies. But in small arguments, how much oneness was there? Or did we feel a constant clashing, a constant bashing? Maybe we finally made it our way to our final destination, but on the way, was there a spirit of oneness? Can we not agree with somebody? And might our spirit affect the way that we agree with somebody? Aren't there many ways to agree with somebody? Some ways being more at one, as in more encouraging, as in don't we always want to encourage ourselves? While other times might be more divisive, as more othering. But isn't it important to feel a oneness? To identify whether or not you are actually clicking, you might find your way to the final destination, but on the way, was there a lot of bashing? Was the spirit not as one? They often say it came out of nowhere. It was a blind spot, or was it? Was there a oneness in the small day-to-day minutia? The day-to-day dealings of day-to-day life? Is there a oneness in spirit? As we know that there are many ways to agree or disagree with people, some might being more one with others and some might be more othering of others, as in less self-loving, not projecting a self onto them, but rather seeing them as an other. For we know that once you project yourself onto another, isn't your spirit always one of oneness? Isn't it always one of encouragement, as we are always trying to encourage ourselves as well? As long as we are pretending that there's a candle in front of our lips that we're trying to not put out. All of it with a candle in front of our lips that we're trying to not put out. As we are always trying to feel better for ourselves in our own bodies, might we only understand other people through this same lens? The same lens of trying to always feel better. Might we only understand one another when we see them through this lens? Now what ends up physicalizing in their body or their life situation might be totally different, as they might have had to jump through different scenarios. And had different starting places, and as we are all different physically, but don't we all have needs? Don't we all have needs? And so in order for us to even understand whether or not they're loving or we are loving them, don't we must project ourselves onto them as somebody who's always trying to feel better? And only through this lens are we able to finally feel some love around here? Are we able to finally pretend that the back 1/3 of our tongues are vertical and feel so good from it? Are we able to finally become aware of that? Are we finally able to become aware of the tips of the tongue wanting to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth? Might we quicker identify who is becoming one with us by shifting our paradigm to seeing the oneness in everyday spirits, as opposed to finally just landing at the same space? Wouldn't we might be able to listen to each other finally, as we are placing their candle in front of the lips that we're trying to not put out, in front of everybody's lips that they're trying to not put out, remembering that the tip of the tongues want to be vertical. The tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth. That's just her being silly. Are we remembering that the tip of the tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth? And are you remembering that the back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical? Up and down, up and down, up and down. No matter where you are, no matter whether you are walking around or whether you are in a car. I invite you to say it with me. The weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. The weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. Again, say it with me. The weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. One more time, say it with me. The weight-bearing portion of the spine is the front. Whether you came from Discord, or whether you are a friend IRL, or whether you came from Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter, I want to thank you so much for coming through, for hanging out on this True Love Tuesday with us, where we are stretching our self-awareness every day, every morning, every weekday morning, with your host Herbie, here on Padawan. It is 6:30 a.m. We hope that you've enjoyed this hour with us just as much as we did. We hope that you have allowed all of these words to go in one ear and out the other. We are reaching hump day tomorrow. It is Warfare Wednesday tomorrow. We shall be attaching ourselves with some, or we shall be protecting ourselves rather, with some great body magic tricks and some spiritual armor. Spiritual mithril armor for us. As we face this world, and they will not take us alive. Grab yourself, grab your lover, grab your family. They will not take us alive. So long as we are feeling the front of our shins, I'll go on forever. In the simulation of ours in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with a breath that you take, we invite you to always hold that controller with us properly, by keeping in your awareness that in every person's mind's eye, there is a candle flickering right in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. No matter what. Whether they are diving under the water, whether they are hanging out with you on a skyrise, or whether they're hanging out with you and just speaking with you right in front of your face on the street. We invite you to hold this controller properly today, and for the rest of your life. If you want to, you can do whatever you will. How? By keeping in your awareness that there is a candle in front of everybody's lips in their mind's eye. There's just a candle flickering in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out. As you're remembering that the tip of a tongue wants to be anchored to the back of the bottom front teeth for everybody. The back 1/3 of the tongue is vertical for everybody. Up and down, up and down. Remember, your weight is delivered down these rainbow arches, not into the tailbone. And that you do not sit on your legs. Let's calibrate that controller properly together. You do not sit on your legs, and how does that feel for you? We are looking for help, and we will be growing. I'll go on forever. We hope you'll join us. Hope you've been feeling great from the inside out. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. Supercharging every weekday morning. Stay super, you superhuman you. We'll see you back here tomorrow for Warfare Wednesday. My name is Herbie. Good morning, and this has been absolutely Padawan. One-ness.